Welcome to the Going Green podcast. Today we're going to have a look at electric vehicles, specifically, I suppose, and more. We're going to probably concentrate on having a look at electric trucks and lorries. So
Right.
I have to be quite honest with you that I haven't seen that many on the road, but then would I actually notice? That's one of the big things. Now, would I actually notice much difference with sort of a 30 odd ton lorry going past me? Well, usually it's me going past one of those rather than them going past me. But would I actually notice on the motorway if I'm passing an electric vehicle like that rather than sort of a conventionally powered diesel lorry?
And
The answer is probably not.
the answer is no, you wouldn't. It's one of those dumb things. What they're doing with these, like, say, their trucks, is basically they're just replacing the engine part with electric, and
Yeah, because a typical articulated lorry is going to be basically just the front power unit is what you're changing, not
the articulated.
not the articulated bit, which is probably most of the lorry that you actually look at.
Yeah, so it's one of those things. But there are other things. I can reveal. I reveal. Tesco's has apparently got loads, about 400 of these new electric trucks to do small, I say, deliveries. They're from their central, say, hubs to the small little areas, little convenience stores, uh, so that they could help reduce, of course, their costs of petrol and things, and as well as they say, to improve the air quality, so they can get around things like the low uh, emission charge
In
thing
London,
in
yeah.
London, as well as what's happening. So it's one of those things. That's what they're rolling out. But to the point of, does it look any different than a truck? The answer is no. Apart from, it just says on it,
Electric
it's got,
somewhere.
the electric symbol. Like most hybrids have got a little symbol that says, it's a hybrid, but that's it. Because it is, the truck is, got its job to do what a truck does. And then it's just got the power unit at the front. And, well, you're not going to see a boxy power unit. But in relation to, as I said, can you tell the difference in the motorway? They said a electric car going past, let's say, daftly at 30 miles an hour, right, sounds more like a jet engine going past, which is, how would I know what a jet engine sounds like going past? But we'll glance over that, as opposed to your typical sort of more, not clunky sound, but rumbling sound.
I don't know. I would know what a jet engine sounds like. I was standing on an aircraft carrier when a Harrier came up from the sea level, leveled with the deck. And when you say a jet engine, I mean I couldn't talk to the nearest person. In fact, I wasn't even sure if I could hear myself if I spoke.
Yeah, I know. I know. It's, as I said, but it's one of those dumb things. That's what they compare it to, as in, it's the sound of a whoosh, as opposed to a lot of grumbling going past. I mean, that's what they say they sound like. But as I said, most people say that's actually the tires on the road is actually 90% of the sound of a car
Yeah,
makes anyway. And so, you know, is it a problem of, sort of, you're not going to notice the sound apart from there is no rumblings? And who's going to complain about no rumblings, especially if it's improving air quality by not producing as much? So, yeah. So anyway, so back to the whole thing of, sort of, so Tesco's have launched these new trucks, and they're doing all these wonderful savings, and they don't look anything different apart from, of course, they're being advertised as sort of, meet the new electric truck. And it's one of those things where, people sort of like, let's make everything look futuristic. And the answer is no. You look at modern cars, and you look at all the electric hybrids, and the answer is they don't look any different, because you don't
yeah,
want.
just a few look a little bit conceptual to try and sort of market them, but most of them, I would agree, look just like ordinary cars, and it's just a little symbol on it to say, electric, and it's sort of there. Yeah. Right now, big problems with all these electric vehicles is range. And I also think of lorries, and I typically think of long distance lorry driving. In the UK, that's not that difficult because basically, we're not that big a country. So we're not talking about an enormous sort of distance to sort of go. And I was having a look at some of these uh, regional transport lorries. Basically, something that's going to go up and down the motorway delivering sort of goods. And something like a 40-ton lorry can have a 350-kilometer range, which is not really that bad. And if you want to take it up to 64 tons, which we don't have in this country, but we have in Europe, then they are limited more to about 250 kilometers. And you think, well, okay, that's all right, but what's it like to charge one of those things? And the answer is 90 minutes. And if you think about a lorry delivering its goods and probably unloading, which a lot of them do, I watch them at the supermarkets. They come in and they don't dump the sort of trailer and off they go. They come in, they unload it, and then they go off somewhere else. And at that point, they could charge, and a 90-minute charge is not too bad.
90 minutes for, turnaround of the truck to be unloaded and then technically loaded.
Yeah.
That's a reasonable sort of time.
They're using 375 kilowatt chargers.
Bloody hell.
Yeah, it is quite a massive sort of idea there. And basically, these lorries have something like about a 400 kilowatt continuous power output, which is sort of really quite good, really, I think.
Yeah, it's one of those dumb things. You hear about all the electric cars, and then they try to push as much as they can, but you only can get, let's say 200-mile range in a car, one of these cars. And they said, well, that's the problem with an electric car is it needs to contain people.
Odd that, isn't it?
I know, right? And well, there's not much space for a car, as in for the batteries to improve more range. If you've got to have people inside, it's one of those bizarre things. Whereas a truck, you've got to look at what a truck can have. It's going to have a driver, a single driver, maybe a cat, I don't know, whatever. But that's it. And as well as all these stuff to pull and so all the space of a lorry, is sort of can just be given to, oh, look, the lorry is now what, 30 centimeters longer. Is that going to make a real difference as opposed to a sort of, car where they've had to, that 30 centimeters because put another battery in, it's not a ridiculous thing. And so you talk about range and you have these problems, but it's not an issue when you're not having to think about people. And then you might think, so, but what about all these electric buses? They're the controversial thing. Of course, they've got all the room for people. And the answer is, well, yes. But at the same time, they're not built like a car. They're built for mass containing of people. And so what if they just have all the batteries on the top or underneath? They raise the floor up. And they've got loads of space on the bottom of where you are underneath where you're standing. Because you're not needing to sort of fit people that, in like a car. A car is a very inefficient way to not transport people.
It is.
But we'll glance over that fact. But to actually get people to be, to move people around in, if that makes any sense, as in it's, you could take it for, whereas, might say a bus, but a bus can fit sort of something down for like 48 people in it. This is a very, whatever size.
And almost the same power plant.
And the same power plant as, I won't say a car, but as a truck. And then, you can sort of see the benefit that way. And then it goes to the terminal. It's got a 90-minute charge time. Well, gives the bus driver a nice rest, and off it goes. It understands that this is the what electrification or the this electrical revolution is meant to be. It's the sort of taking not electricity or electric vehicles to the public, if that makes any sense, but it is doing places where they don't require off the journey. You're not going to the middle of nowhere. You're just sort of doing the same route, the same journey, pootling around, not going that fast. And it's sort of, almost sort of the automation of everything. It's sort of,
So let's ask, what are some of the advantages of an electric vehicle? Well, there's one of those, which is obviously pollution. London has its congestion charge, and basically, if you've got an electric vehicle, you don't pay much for that.
so I've
So
done,
so that'd be better if you've got a lorry. But we're also looking at electric heavy goods vehicles, or HGVs, are soon going to be cheaper overall than diesels in this country. Uh, right, the government isn't doing much about this to try and enable the transition to zero emission trucks. But basically, it looks like at the moment, much of the UK's goods are going to be basically delivered electrically, and we're going to see those really happening quite a lot, because electric trucks are basically now getting to be cheaper to own and run than a diesel.
and that's not necessarily including the price of the diesel, if that
Yeah,
makes any sense. It's not, it's things like the maintenance of and those sorts of things. So just throwing that one out, as in people say, oh, how much electricity costs more than diesel or gas, except in terms of petrol, diesel, or that it is electricity so much cheaper because, of course, how do you charge it or how do you fill it and how do you sort of use it? Because, of course, uh, in trucks have to, of course, use their fuel all the time, but when they're stopped, who do they need? It's almost like that sort of you turn the
yeah.
car off sort of thing.
Whereas the electrics don't use that much. So I was having a look at some sort of figures here for sort of delivery of stuff around the sort of the country, and where it was going. And basically, for most jobs, the electric vehicle was no cheaper than an ordinary vehicle, a diesel or petrol. However, for regional supermarket deliveries, it started becoming significantly cheaper. Um, and that is where you can start making some differences. Basically, I'm talking about here what I would call a rigid HGV rather than an articulated
Oh,
vehicle,
right,
just
right.
one that's just uh, a big lorry, as far as I'm concerned. And this is the total cost of ownership. That's purchase price, energy, maintenance cost, and even doing pessimistic assumptions about sort of fuel and battery prices, which isn't too difficult. Electric HGVs are now on parity with diesel, and in the next few years, we're going to see them become significantly cheaper. And they're meeting the range, and they're basically meeting the operational needs that most truck sort of owners, whatever, require of them. So that's looking quite good, really.
So speaking of electric trucks and things, we're looking at sort of what other electric vehicles are out there. We're talking things like, of course, you've got your electric postal trucks, and, sort of little cab, basically cars but vans, those sort of things. And people are looking at basically where electrification or putting electric vehicle might actually benefit the system, and they're actually looking at putting electric trucks or these electric trucks as the electric sanitation vehicles or garbage trucks essentially, because they're looking at a garbage truck, right, doesn't travel that far that long, but also it basically does a lot of stops and starts, which of course is burning up fuel. And with electric,
It doesn't.
it doesn't.
Yeah.
As in, it's on or off, almost like as an electric milk float. And so they're saying that the not the cost of it, but sort of the long term cost of sort of firstly transition, but actually moving through is actually worth putting in now because, of course, the savings are so much in the future. Speaking of things and savings, um, they they were talking about sort of a new electric fire engine, which sounds a bit tough, but as we keep saying, all we're doing is taking a truck, replacing the power plant, of course, which is the engine, with electricity. All the rest of the truck remains the same. They were looking at sort of, I think was it the London Fire Brigade? They were going to get one very soon.
They were talking about bringing one in at the end of 2022. So hopefully that's been now trialed for sort of getting on for 6 months.
6 months. Well, I know the Los Angeles Fire Department. They said they were going to start. They've just completed their trials of some electric fire engines and will basically have signed the deal to have some start delivered. And basically, they said, of course, a fire engine has to have the same requirements of a fire engine. So, you know, no
Yeah, because
problem.
we looked at the cost, didn't we, Paul, for how much does a fire engine cost? And basically, it was about $1 million,
Yeah,
do American stuff. And an electric fire engine was just about $1.2 million. So it wasn't an awful lot more expensive. Because as you were saying, most of the fire engine isn't the power plant. Most of the fire engine is the fire
the
engine
fire
bit,
engine bit. The pump and all the tools and all the bits and pieces.
red paint.
Well, yeah. Well, this was actually going to be yellow paint, but
Oh,
we'll glance over that differently because welcome to Los Angeles, where they like to be different. But it is all these vehicles that people are saying which can be different, what can be looked at, and sort of where not electrification, all things can work, but we're talking where it makes the most sense, as in things like fire engines and garbage trucks and sort of buses and all those sorts of things. 'Cause it makes a lot of sense to have things that put around, don't go that fast, don't go that much. Because one of the major complaints of people with or have of electric cars is they have this unbelievable amount of acceleration or torque, trying to, because that's what electric motors do. But they said, but, you know, they've got no real top speed. They just will not continue to continuously accelerate. They sort of just get to their top speed and then sort of stop.
accelerating, yeah.
And they just sort of, that's their top speed. And people saying, oh, but with a electric one, you just sort of, it just gets faster and faster and faster with the continuing surge of accelerations. But,
No.
and the answer is not quite. So when people moaning that sort of, an electric car's top speed, it's only 170 as opposed to an electric car, or not, sorry, a gasoline powered car is sort of 239. And the answer is,
You can't go faster than 70 miles an hour in this country anywhere.
yeah. And I'm saying that, all right, let's say you go for the electric Formula E Sport, where they are managing to do, say, the massive speed of 150, but they're not doing the 200, and then you look at the F1 cars, where are they doing the 200 miles an hour? And the answer is they are, but it's not massively over 200 miles an hour. We're talking maybe 201, sort of those sort of things. And
Well, you were talking about to me earlier about what's the future of F1 car racing, and the answer is that when we start sort of all going electric, are we going to really want to have these petrol guzzling vehicles still running around a track, or are we going to go more to Formula E?
Well, it's one of those dumb things you talk about. Sort well, look, horse racing is that sort of style. The antiquated style of sort of people being drawn by horse and carriages, and now they're only being moved to things. Is there still going to be, like I say, Formula One, basically gas powered? Look at how the old system of sort of doing it, or you going to convert everybody onto the new Formula E package? And the answer is that's still happening and that's still going. But unfortunately, gasoline's still here to stay. Unfortunately, this is one of the main things you see. Even though you look at the car manufacturers, they are still manufacturing gasoline powered cars.
But
And
not for much longer.
the point is, because lots of countries have said they're going to stop selling the ban on places selling these gas powered cars, they're basically going to last only into second-hand market, so there's no new ones. So suddenly, no one's allowed to buy a gasoline-powered car. In which case, then you're just pushing everybody into the electric side, which is great. And so people like,
Well, we will have hybrids for quite a long time, won't we? We actually manage quite a lot of hybrids, hybrid electrics for quite a few years yet, because they're not talking about only going over to just electrics.
yeah, there is a phased approach sort of thing, but it's the idea that sort of it's the only gasoline powered cars will be sold, and then sort of, well, maybe you're going to have to move. Why don't you put a hybrid F1 car? And it's sort of like, what was the point in putting in the hybrid?
Well,
It's the how everything's going to change very slowly and get there, but
I was going to say they actually do have hybrid electric Formula One racing cars. They all use them at the moment. They all have this extra little boost that they can use on their Formula One cars.
yeah, because welcome to the technology. Why do you think Formula One E, or not Formula One E, Formula One is sort of Formula One? It's because basically that's where they're using and developing all the engine technology. Yes, to race around, and but racing generates money for the research and development, and then they can take what works and then slowly sputter it down into their economy-based vehicles. And things like the hybrid motor, that was, what was it, 2010? I can't remember when it came out, but in Formula One. But they were very early adopters onto this because it gave this speed boost, and everybody excited because it gave the speed boost. But of course, that then brought in the other hybrids, saying that sort of, well, if we can do it to a Formula One engine, why can't we not just rapidly make them? Because making one engine, a bespoke engine, is expensive, but making lots is cheap. So it's sort of one of those odd arguments where you actually want both a bespoke and a mass-produced engine at the same time.
Yeah, because the more you can build, the cheaper we can get. This is what's happening effectively to lorries. That we look at sort of what lorries do, and they are now becoming ideal candidates for electrification. Basically, something like 75% of all the UK's rigid heavy lorries basically could be replaced, and about 35% of the articulated lorries could easily be replaced for the jobs that they're actually doing. And that sort of is useful. And these trucks aren't, in fact, going to impinge on the public charging points because they're going to go from depot to depot where they're going to get charged up. So it's going to be a win-win situation, really. We should see more electric trucks on the road. We probably won't hear them as much. They look more or less the same. They're doing the same sort of job. The only thing is now they're starting to become, and over the next few years, they will become cheaper to run than their diesel alternatives. and then that's going to be a strong force for change because why are you going to want to have an expensive diesel when you can have a cheap electric?
Yeah, it is this whole sort of idea that the infrastructure's changing and it's sort of looking at where we're going. You know, there's one of the things where we're talking about the buses, and they were talking about, well, do we need, say, electric buses in regards to having batteries on board? Or could they almost run off like a tram system where basically, they just use overhead wires instead and just have so they don't have the battery, which of course saves a lot of money there because they're not needing, the cost of building and manufacturing a battery, but yet they have the benefit of being not not electric, but sort of the benefit of being an electric vehicle, and they might be actually able to save the money that one. And all that has to be done is put overhead electricity lines. You say, oh, but they don't look very good. Well, why not put them in the ground? There are all
And they cost, though, of course, that the infrastructure does cost to do that. But is that going to cost more than you're sort of electrifying your fleet? The advantage of having an electric vehicle over electric tram is it doesn't have to go on that particular route. It can divert if necessary. So there's one of those things. But I see around here we have maybe one or two electric buses.
yeah, they're all right.
I haven't been on one.
Can't really tell the difference. So, but it's one of those things you're not going to notice the change. It just will just happen. Yeah, the only notice you might have is sort of lovely signs saying "I'm electric," or sort of I'm being green and clean. Uh, just as I said, just one of those. It is happening. It is if you look at it and see it in sort of the back end of things. We are moving to this electric future, whether or not people are wanting it or not. And the more importantly, it's happening where it should happen, if that makes any sense. It's happening on the more industrial base. It's happening where on these lorries that are, you know, basically going from depot to depot, where you can have all right charging stations and sort of things. And they're happening in sensible places, like thinking of the use case of vehicles like the garbage trucks that just stop and start. Well, do they need, you know, and that sort of saves a lot of money that way. And then suddenly you're not spending all the money on gasoline and sort of just where it goes. And then, you could say, oh, buy another truck for that cost of a that petrol fuel tank.
Something else we looked at quickly, we thought, right, okay, how about electric tractors?
And the reason we're looking at that, because we went from fire engines and then thought, well, an electric tractor, electric motors have a terrific amount of torque, and so
Agricultural vehicles need a
all
terrific amount of torque.
so we thought, right, let's line them. Is there an electric tractor as an out there, to sort of replace sort of the idea? Because of course, as I said, tractors aren't used all the time. I know they look like they're being used, but sort of, they're very sort of, you drive them out in the field, but the rest of the time they'd be charging it, that sort of thing, and you're not having to transport the person. So you're not having to think. So you can have, let's say, the tractor suddenly another foot longer. It's not a big deal. Um, and we just thought, right, is there electric tractor in the works? Is there ones happening? And we have some bad news about this.
There aren't many, yeah. There are small tractors, little tractors for sort of basically for sort of local sort of movement, sort of basically, I would like to call it yard or paddock tasks. And they're great. And there are a few sort of little electric tractors. But for the big tractor, the sort of one that's going to go up and down ploughing the fields, no, because basically it requires when they're diesel at the moment, they require refueling quite often. And with the electric ones, basically you just cannot get enough sort of work done, and you then don't want to sort of park your tractor up for 90 minutes and charge it perhaps 2 or 3 times during a day when you're trying to do harvesting or ploughing. And so at the moment, there isn't anything in the way of sort of a big tractor, just little ones. So
Just one of those
we,
things.
we were a little bit disappointed on that one when we were having a look
Yeah,
at that.
we
Yeah.
were just exploring what electric vehicles are out there. Sort of. Is there, what
So,
as we said, we found out about electric fire engines. We didn't know about they were coming through, but electrification's coming.
so it's looking like it's going to be more cost effective for HGVs, the rigid lorries, and the articulated lorries to become electrified. The local sort of delivery trucks, they're being electrified, and we're seeing a few more of those around. And we're here to stay, I think. Electric vehicles are now here to stay. They're making their mark, they're becoming cost effective to use. And the only one that's falling behind are the people like me who want to have an electric car and still can't afford one. So, I could sell my house and buy a Tesla, I suppose, but I'd still need somewhere I could try and charge it up. So it's still a problem there, and hopefully that will get solved in the near future. You've been listening to the Going Green podcast looking at progress on electric vehicles. We'll be back next time with more interesting, I hope, things on Going Green. Until then, it's goodbye from me.
And a goodbye from me.
Bye bye.
Bye.